Greetings, children, and welcome to my chamber. My name is Rotherick Gastblood, and I'm your host of Tales from the Dark Chamber. This week, we have a great show for you. Tales to make your skin crawl. Each week, my chambermate and I read a scary tale that we found on the internet, or perhaps left under some corpse. Either way, we think you're going to like it, and we're just dying for you to hear it. So sit right back, light a candle, and let's have a ghoul evening. Ah, Woody, you're here.
Hey, Rotherick.
New hobby we have there, eh, Woody?
Oh, well, yeah, sorta.
Sorta? What do you mean? Looks like a small clay statue to me. Getting into sculpture, I see.
Well, it is a statue, but there's a reason I'm building it.
Getting lonely at night?
What's that, Rotherick?
Oh, nothing. Something I read today.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to do with this?
So, I was in the mansion library, and I came across this old book.
Let me see.
Yeah, and I was flipping through the pages, and I came to this page. Homo totus arido.
What?
Homo totus arido. Apparently, it's an incantation that can bring a clay statue to life, like this one.
Oh, Woody, I don't think you should be trying any.
Here goes.
Woody.
Homo totus arido.
Woody.
Nique poro quisquam est qui dolorum ipsum
Woody.
Hia dolor sitamet consecutor adipicisi.
Woody.
What just happened? My statue. It's obliterated.
Woody, that is what I was going to tell you.
Huh?
You ninny. This is not an incantation for bringing animated life to a clay statue, also known as a golem. It's Latin for bursting man, or rather, an explosive dummy.
Oh,
Like
I
yourself.
guess that's why there's a warning at the bottom of the page. Don't try this at home. Highly explosive. Which, by the way, is the theme for this week's story. After Stan and Joseph were rescued from the possessed nuns by the demon-tracking bull, Stan gets a message from Rebecca. Tonight, we hear her story, and brother, is this a doozy. Why the hell was Craig pricked? Part 3. Hi, Stan. I'm not sure this message will reach you because I have been trying to call you, but you are not picking up. I hope you are okay. There is so much that has happened here ever since you left. I desperately need to speak to you, to hear your voice, and to know everything is okay. I really hope you will be able to get this message. I'm sorry for the length. I am in serious trouble. Some problems from my family's past are coming back to haunt me. I am really worried and kind of stressed out. Let me start from the beginning. When you and Joseph left, I began to show Father Moffat the ropes. The man changed as soon as you guys departed. He became friendlier, a little too friendly. He constantly made inappropriate remarks and jokes about my body. At first, I thought it was just old man humor, but it got worse as the day progressed. He would walk too close behind me, smell my hair, place a hand on my shoulder a bit longer than appropriate, and I would occasionally catch him oogling my breast. At the end of the day, last night, I decided to spend some time in my bedroom away from the man. I tried calling you and hear of your progress with the mission. I was worried sick when you didn't pick up. I was immensely irritated and nettled when I heard the knock on my door. Since we were the only two people in the house, I knew it was Father Moffat at the door. I ignored him for a whole minute, and he eventually decided to let himself in. I quickly dropped my head on my pillow and pretended to be sleeping. The pastor prodded me to wake up. I feigned grogginess when I opened my eyes, and to my annoyance, the man was sitting on the edge of my bed. His broad grin accentuated his yellow teeth and stretched the wrinkled skin on his face. Bile bubbled in my stomach and threatened to shoot up my throat as I looked at the shriveled and pale old man sitting on the edge of my bed. "I am sorry to wake you, sister. I got rather lonely. Do you mind joining me in the living room?" He slowly placed his hand on my right foot and continued, "Or maybe I can join you in here." I quickly moved my leg away from his grasp and sat up in my bed. I was really panicking at this moment. I wanted to shout at him to get out, but before I could give the man a piece of my mind, I heard a loud bang, and the pastor's head exploded. Blood and brain fragments flew all over my room like birthday confetti. I screamed as the headless body of the pastor toppled to the floor. I noticed a humanoid figure standing at my bedroom door, which the pastor had carelessly left open. Fear surged through my body as I instantly recognized the figure at my door. Dressed in a tailor-made black suit, white cotton shirt, black thin tie, black gloves, and a ski mask embroidered with military colors. I knew exactly what this figure was. I was barely surprised when it turned the shotgun in its hands towards me. The pastor was just an unfortunate person to be with me in the room, but I knew that this assailant had come for me. "I know you said my father had already told you about his past with the mafia, but he didn't exactly tell you everything. I don't want for there to be secrets between us, so let me tell you exactly what my father's history is like. My father was not just a part of the most powerful mafia in Mexico, but he was the co-founding father of this cartel. My father was raised by his grandmother, my great-grandmother. We just called her Nana. The neighborhood my father was raised in was one that offered very little in the way of opportunity. Most children ended up joining gangs and living criminal lives, which only led them to jail or a premature death. Nana was a clay potter and could not afford to send my father and his little brother Bernardo to school. So my father spent most of his days with his best friend, Hector Rodriguez. As teenagers, the duo tried numerous times to join gangs, which were quite a lot in the neighborhood. Both of them were rejected by every single cartel they approached, reason being that they had no street cred and were labeled as losers by most. Frustrated and feeling despondent, they even tried to get jobs, but also could not find any luck. The two of them began spending time outside of a boutique shop in the middle of the city. From there, they watched different gangs chasing each other all over the city. My father and Hector would spend hours daydreaming and imagining themselves as leaders of some of these gangs. In an alley next to the boutique, there were innumerable broken, defunct mannequins which the shop no longer needed. My father had the idea to collect the mannequins, fix up some of their broken parts with Nana's clay, and then sell them to the other boutique shops. Hector loved the idea, and they both set out in this new mission. Nana, who was impressed with their initiative and creativity, helped them in their endeavor. However, business didn't take off as either my father or Hector had envisaged. They weren't able to sell a single mannequin. My father stored all 10 of the mannequins they had fixed in the basement and forgot about them for several years until Hector met a girl at a carnival. The girl's name was Maria. She spent all night with Hector, where she disclosed to him that she was a necromancer. Hector didn't believe her until she rose up an old dog who had died 2 months prior and was buried in his backyard. My father always said Hector was smart and innovative, but he was mostly ambitious. He convinced Maria that he loved her deeply and she should run away from the carnival and stay with him. Hector had a silver tongue, and swaying the girl's mind required little effort. He then told my father of his new girlfriend and the plans he had for her. Hector wanted Maria to bring the mannequins to life. This way, they could start their own gang. My father was on board with the idea, and both of them cajoled Maria into giving the mannequins life. She told them she had never done anything like that before, but vowed to try. She then told them she would need human brains and hearts for her to try a spell she had heard as a child. So my father and Hector dug up old graves of freshly buried bodies from a local cemetery to get the ingredients for Maria. Maria worked on only one mannequin at first. With her very first attempt, she succeeded. She brought the mannequin to life. Although the mannequin couldn't talk or breathe or blink its eyes, it was alive. Its body was always shaking, and it regularly made a humming sound with its mouth. It could also walk properly like a human being, and not rigidly like a robot. The mannequin could only take orders from Hector, my father, and Maria, because the ritual she used required blood sacrifices from the trio, which they all offered. My father, Hector, and Maria celebrated their success all night. They called this first mannequin T1 for Trooper Number 1. They dressed T1 with a ragged old clothes and decided to use a black ski mask to cover his head. They also used a pair of old torn gloves to cover his hands. All of these precautions were taken for it not to be obvious to people that T1 was a mannequin. However, the following day, as they had more experiments with T1, they found out that somehow he could feel, process emotions, and so forth. This meant that when he ordered him to kill a cat or smash a window, he wouldn't oblige, because he felt the action was not just. So for the next mannequins they were able to raise, Maria suggested that they don't need human hearts. The remaining 9 mannequins were brought to life with only a brain to obey their masters. Hector, Maria, and my father found out that these mannequins obeyed everything they said to the letter. They named the new small gang the Clay Clan. Since my father and Hector had spent a lot of time analyzing all the gangs of the city, they knew which ones were the weakest. They attacked these powerless gangs first, only armed with crossbows and broken beer bottles. These gangs didn't know that the Clay Troopers, mannequins, required a headshot for a kill, like a zombie, so they succumbed to defeat. The Clay Troopers' bodies were usually riddled with bullets after the raids, but were virtually not damaged because my father had stuffed the insides of their bodies with clay. From their first couple of raids, my father and Hector managed to procure guns, drugs, and a little bit of cash. They sold the drugs for more cash, which they used to buy more guns and more clay. They collected more disregarded mannequins from the boutique shops around the city, and since Maria had already taught them both how to do their ritual, they rapidly built an army. They stole more brains from the hospitals and mortuaries. My father had told me Hector's ambition eventually drove him to murdering people to get their brains to create more Clay Troopers. They rose up thousands of Clay Troopers, and with this army, they took over the continent. It took only 6 months for the Clay Clan to be the single biggest drug cartel in the country. Not a single other gang in Mexico could even fart without my father or Hector's permission. They became so powerful that they even controlled 3/4 of the police in the country. Since money was no longer an issue, they developed a dress code for the Clay Troopers. Tailor-made black suits, black ties, white shirts, ski masks with military colors, and black gloves was the mandatory regalia for all Clay Troopers. Hector eventually married Maria, and according to my father, he cheated on her numerous times, but she never divorced him. For years, my father lived the reckless single life you would expect from a young mafia boss. Bernardo, his younger brother, wanted to join the Clay gang, but my father refused. Instead, he offered to pay for Bernardo's education and sent him to a high school in the USA. However, Bernardo was expelled after he committed several felonies at school. He told my father he was going to join the army, and he did. A few years later, he told my father that he was rapidly upgraded to a special forces team he can't talk about. He also informed my father that he told his new privy agent that he is not related to my father because of his mafia excursions. My father soon met a girl with whom he fell deeply in love with. Within months, she was pregnant. Within a year, they were married. This girl's name was Gloria. She was my mother. I have vague recollections of my mother, but I remember she was the exact opposite of my father. She loved going to church, preaching the gospel, helping out at orphanage homes, or just being a difference maker in the society. She gradually turned my father to being a caring and God-fearing man. Hector didn't like this because my father began to talk about hanging up his boots with the mafia and focus on raising his family. Hector blamed me and my mother for this. So one day, Hector launched a secret attack on my mother and I when we were alone at home. The clay troopers mercilessly slaughtered my mother, but not before she hid me in the attic. It's not easy for a child to see her mother being butchered like a pig. I don't want to write the details of what they did to her because it's already too much for me to think about it. Over the years, I have had too many nightmares of that night. The troopers flipped the house upside down, but could not find me. When my father returned and he moaned over his dead wife, he found me in the attic and I told him everything. At first, he didn't want to believe me, but he knew a child like me had nothing to gain from lying. My father took me to Nana's house and set out to confront his best friend. Hector denied everything and tried calming down my father, but my father was boiling with rage and he attacked Hector. Hector had done something to the clay soldiers because they were now only obeying him and Maria. I think they knew that my father was slipping away from the cartel and would soon turn on them. So when my father attacked Hector, he was heavily outnumbered. The clay troopers severely beat him up, but my father managed to escape before they murdered him, thanks to the help of T1. Ever since T1 began disobeying Hector and Maria's evil commands, they treated the trooper with disdain. As for my father, he always cared and looked after T1, and when he needed the clay trooper, it helped him out. After escaping, my father went straight to the police. He knew the exact people to talk to, people who were not on the Clay Clan's payroll. Before going to the police station, my father commanded T1 to run away. A lot of people didn't know that most members of the Clay Clan were Frankenstein mannequins with zero conscience. I think even today it's still a secret. Of course, most of the senior positions in the gang were held by humans, but the dirty work was mostly done by the troopers. So my father knew the police would probably dismantle T1 or worse. He commanded the alpha mannequin to run and never stop running. Although there were many charges facing my father upon confessing, he managed not to serve a single day in jail. Many federal agencies around the world were interested in taking down the Clay Clan because the cartel was so large it operated in nearly every country in Europe, Africa, North and South America. My father had a great deal from the FBI here in the U.S., where him and I got citizenships and witness protection in the country. All these measures were taken because while most of the Clay Clan were arrested and the cartel's drugs and weapons were seized, Hector was never caught. But I know Maria was arrested and she is probably still in prison today. Since Nana had adamantly refused to leave the country because she still insisted she would rather die in her own home, we had to leave her behind. Once the woman had made up her mind, it was difficult to convince her otherwise. We thought surely Hector would go after her, but he didn't. However, Nana died a couple of years later due to heart failure. We couldn't even go to her funeral. My father soon began taking priesthood classes and was ordained a few years back. I guess the rest you know. So when I realized the figure at my doorstep is a clay trooper, I knew Hector had found me, the girl he was supposed to kill all those years ago with her mother. Before the clay trooper could pull his trigger, I heard another loud bang, and his head exploded. Once again, in the space of a minute, my body was sprayed with blood and shards of brain matter. The trooper's body collapsed to the floor, and someone stepped up to the door. For the first time ever since Father Moffat had entered my room, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Uncle Bernardo was the person at my door. My uncle's round face was well-shaven. His thick dark hair with copious amounts of hair gel was cut into a side-part hairstyle. His long-sleeved cotton-white shirt was rolled up to his elbows, and a golden Rolex dangled from his wrist. I got up, ran over, and embraced my uncle. Even when we had moved to the USA, he was always able to find us and occasionally visit. The agency he works for must be very powerful and resourceful. They have found you. We have to go now, Uncle Bernardo hoarsely said to me as his eyes darted around my room. I was about to run and pack my things, but he grabbed my hand and said, "There is no time. Leave everything behind." I realized my uncle didn't have a gun in his hand. I remembered on one of his rare visits after my father married my mother, Uncle Bernardo spoke about how his agency was teaching him skills that are far from normal, skills that most civilians won't believe exist. One such skill was how he can shoot his target with a snap of his fingers. We didn't believe him until he snapped his fingers twice and 2 bullets smashed a pair of beer bottles that were 10 feet away from us. I remember that day like it was yesterday. My mother, father, and I were in awe. Uncle Bernardo refused to tell us how he did it. I figured he had to use the same trick to kill the trooper who was at my doorstep. He briskly walked down the hallway, dragging me along. Another clay trooper popped up ahead of us at the end of the corridor, holding a Glock gun in his hand. Uncle Bernardo lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. There was a loud bang in the hallway, and the head of the trooper blew off from its shoulders. We ran out of the front door only to find 2 more troopers standing in the yard, each of them holding a shotgun. Uncle Bernardo snapped his fingers twice. 2 loud bangs resounded from the darkness, and both troopers lost their heads. It was always in that order. Uncle Bernardo snaps his fingers, there is a loud bang, and the trooper's head is shot off. My uncle pulled me forward, and we ran towards the black car parked just outside of the church gate. Uncle Bernardo opened the back door and jumped in and dragging me with him. When I closed the door behind me, my body stiffened when I realized there was a clay trooper behind the wheel. But it was different from the rest. It wore the same black suit, white shirt, and black tie, but its ski mask was black. I felt a little bit calmer at this realization. There was only one clay trooper I know of who wears a different ski mask from the rest. T1 gave me a thumbs up, moved the gear into drive, and stepped down on the accelerator. "We got company," Uncle Bernardo said as he looked back. T1 increased the car's speed. I looked back and saw 2 clay troopers on black Suzuki motorbikes following us. The troopers had 2 MP5 submachine guns strapped with a belt around their shoulders and pointed at us. They opened fire and bullets trounced the back window of the car. I ducked down expecting the window to shatter, but nothing of the sort had happened. I looked up and saw my uncle seated calmly as the bullets belted the rear window. "Bulletproof windows," he said, looking down at me. He snapped his fingers. I heard a loud bang, and one of the motorist troopers fell behind us after his head was blown off. Again, snap, bang, and headshot, and the other trooper tumbled. However, 6 more biker troopers emerged from the dark corners of the empty street we were speeding down. They were all armed with the same arsenal as their fallen brethren. While 4 of the bikers assaulted the back window with bullets, the other 2 flanked both sides of the car. "Get down," Uncle Bernardo screamed at me. "Those windows aren't bulletproof." The backside windows of the car shattered when the bullets came from the 2 other bikers on the left and the right side of the car. I still wonder why they only made the back window bulletproof. Snap, bang, headshot. The biker on the left side fell. Snap, bang, headshot, and the other biker on the right side dropped to the ground. T1 didn't step down on the brakes, and the car tires screeched to an immediate stop. All 4 bikers pursuing us rammed into the back of the car, and they became airbound. T1 rolled down his windows, aimed his Glock to the sky, and got a headshot of each of the 4 clay troopers before they landed on the ground in front of the car. My father often spoke of how much a good shot T1 was. Apparently, he never missed. I sat up assuming our troubles were over until I realized the reason T1 had actually stopped the car. Ahead of us were more clay troopers on black Suzuki motorbikes and armed with MP5 submachine guns. They were lined up on the road in a straight horizontal line, blocking the way. Uncle Bernardo and I turned back and we saw even more armed clay troopers on bikes had lined up the street horizontally behind us. "What's the plan, T1?" Uncle Bernardo asked. The troopers ahead began charging towards us, guns drawn and firing relentlessly at the car. I turned around and realizing the team at the back was now also speeding towards us. "If you have a plan, now will be the best time to do it," Uncle Bernardo said as he quickly snapped his fingers. Snap, bang, headshot. T1 put the gear back into drive and sped forward. I was cowering in my seat, but was able to see the speedometer of the car rising to 120. Snap, bang, headshot. Before making impact with the oncoming troopers, T1 hit the brakes and avidly turned the steering wheel. As the car wildly rotated like the needle of a broken compass, T1 stuck his hand out of the window and began discharging bullets. My head was spinning as the car did donuts for about a minute, and T1 kept firing bullets out of the window. When the car finally stopped whirling, I quickly opened the door and vomited outside. After that unpleasant experience, I noticed the fallen bodies and motorbikes of all the clay troopers around the car. All of the troopers had received headshots before falling off their bikes and dying. Uncle Bernardo yanked me back into the car and told T1 to drive. "That was awesome," I thanked and complimented T1. We drove off to some cheap motel at the edge of the city. Instead of exchanging normal pleasantries, my uncle thought the best form of greeting was scolding me for having a funeral for my father. "That funeral exposed you, Rebecca. Hector knows where you are, and he won't stop coming for you," he yelled. "I had to at least bury my father," I defended myself. "Where were you?" I saw the glitter of tears in my uncle's eyes before he turned away from me. "I was there," he quietly replied. "What? How come I never saw you? How come you never came to see me? I needed you. I was so lonely," I cried out. My uncle sighed. "I was angry. I was angry at Victor for doing this stupid demon-hunting business, getting himself killed, and leaving you with no parents. I was angry at you for having that public funeral and exposing yourself to the Clay Clan." He breathed out deeply again before continuing. "Besides, my plan was to ambush the Clay Troopers when they came for you because I knew their attack was inevitable. T1 has always been with me, and he helped me make a plan to get you to safety. Even though he can't speak, his hand gestures kind of helped me in devising a plan," my uncle said with a brief chuckle. "Wait, T1 has been with you this whole time?" I asked. "I thought my father told him to run away." "Yeah, and he ran to me. He is now part of the agency I work for. He is a good asset to the company. Anyway, our plan is not done playing out. I still have to get you out of the city, take you somewhere safe. I can't leave without Stan." "Who is Stan?" "He is the guy who was there when you were not." Uncle Bernardo heaved a sigh. "Fair enough. Where is this Stan?" "He is in a town about 6 hours away from here. He went after the demon that killed my father." Uncle Bernardo gritted his teeth. "He is a demon tracker? Where do you find these people?" "Okay, we can get this Stan guy and then get you into hiding. Is there anyone else you want to save?" "Yes." "Who?" "Joseph." "And where is he?" "He is with Stan." "Great. Another demon tracker. Fine. We will go get them in the morning. For now, rest up while T1 and I keep watch." So basically, that is all I wanted to tell you. I am coming there. If Bathim is dead, we can go live our lives elsewhere, where no demon, clay trooper, or anyone else will ever bother you, me or Joseph. Once again, I am sorry this message is so long. I really wanted to tell you about my family's past and all that had happened to me since you left. I didn't want there to be any secrets between us. I really like you, Stan, and I want our relationship to work out. I hope you are okay, and you have already exorcised Bathim. I really hope you will be able to read this message. But more importantly, I hope to see you soon. I love you. Why the Hell Was Craig Pricked? Part 3. Well, folks, that's our story tonight. Rothrick and I hope you enjoyed it. We sure had a great time bringing it to you, and we really appreciate you listening. Tune in next week when we bring you another chilling Tales from the Dark Chamber. And just a note, if you're an aspiring author and want your story read here on Tales from the Dark Chamber, send us a note at talesfromthedarkchamber@gmail.com. If it creeps old Rotherick out enough, we'll air it. And subscribe to our channel here for notification of our next new episode, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Remember, hit that like button and help us grow the channel. Also, make sure you tell your friends about us. Spread the word. If you want your story recorded for your own use, or just want to have it, check out my website at woodygvoiceover.net. You can order there. And again, thank you for listening tonight.